The morning light filtered through silk curtains worth more than most people's cars, casting golden streaks across the mahogany floor of the master bedroom. Victoria Blackwood stood before the full-length mirror, her manicured fingers smoothing down the crimson Versace dress that hugged her 52-year-old figure like a secret waiting to be told. 3 days! Thomas had been in the ground for 3 days, and here she was, trying on a dress that screamed celebration rather than mourning. The Black Widow stereotype felt almost too literal as she admired her reflection. Though the irony wasn't lost on her, she'd played the grieving widow perfectly at the funeral. Tears on cue, trembling hands accepting condolences. The picture of devastation. The performance had been Oscar-worthy. 12 million in liquid assets, she murmured to herself, applying a fresh coat of rouge allure lipstick. 3 properties, Greenwich, the Hamptons, and Aspen. The investment portfolio alone is worth another 5 million. The numbers danced in her head like a lottery winner's dream. 20 years of playing the devoted wife to a man who spent more time with his blueprints than with her. 20 years of dinner parties with his boring business associates, pretending to care about construction permits and zoning laws. 20 years of sleeping next to someone who scheduled intimacy like a board meeting. But Jake made her feel 25 again. She reached for her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with the eagerness of a teenager. 3 more days, baby. After the will reading, we'll be in the Maldives, just like we planned. White sand, blue water, and no more hiding. The message showed delivered but not read. Again. Victoria frowned. Scrolling up through their conversation history, her last 5 messages sat there, unopened. Jake hadn't responded since the night before Thomas's funeral. She tried calling straight to voicemail. The sultry recording of his voice made her stomach flutter. "You know what to do, make it worth my while. Where are you?" she whispered, dialing again. This time, no voicemail. Just an automated message that sent ice through her veins. "The number you have dialed is not in service." She must have misdialed. Her fingers, steadier now despite the growing unease, entered the number again. The same robotic voice delivered the same impossible message. How could a phone number just stop existing? Outside the bedroom door, a floorboard creaked. Victoria's eyes snapped toward the sound, her hand instinctively moving to close her phone. Through the 2-inch gap between the door and its frame, she caught a glimpse of dark fabric pulling back into the shadows. "Elena?" she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd grown accustomed to being obeyed. "Is that you?" The house manager appeared in the doorway, her face an unreadable mask that had served the Blackwood household for 20 years. In her weathered hands she clutched a black envelope, the kind expensive law firms used for documents that changed lives. "My apologies, Mrs. Blackwood. I didn't mean to disturb you." Elena's accent, still tinged with traces of her homeland, wrapped around each word carefully. "You look vibrant this morning." Victoria's eyes narrowed. Was that judgment in the older woman's tone? "Well, life goes on, doesn't it? Thomas wouldn't want me to waste away in widow's weeds forever." "No, I suppose he wouldn't." Elena's dark eyes moved from Victoria's red dress to the phone still clutched in her hand, then back to her face. "Mr. Wellington called while you were selecting your outfit. He asked me to give you this personally." She extended the black envelope, and Victoria noticed how Elena's fingers seemed reluctant to let it go, as if the envelope contained something contagious. When Victoria finally pulled it free, the paper felt heavier than it should, weighted with something more than just cardstock and ink. "What did Marcus want?" Victoria asked, using the lawyer's first name to assert familiarity. "Control. He said the reading of Mr. Thomas's will would be unconventional." Elena paused, choosing her next words with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. "He used the word theatrical," said Mr. Thomas had left very specific instructions that must be followed to the letter. Victoria almost laughed. "Theatrical? Thomas?" The man thought a romantic evening was reviewing quarterly reports over Chinese takeout. Elena's lips twitched in what might have been a smile or might have been something else entirely. "People can surprise you, Mrs. Blackwood. Sometimes the quiet ones have the loudest secrets." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Victoria felt her spine straighten, her chin lift, the posture of someone who'd navigated country club politics and corporate wives' hierarchies for decades. "Well, whatever little show Thomas has planned from beyond the grave, I'm sure it will be manageable." She turned back to the mirror, dismissing Elena with her body language. "Have the car ready for 10:30. I don't want to be late for my inheritance." Elena's reflection appeared behind Victoria's in the mirror, and for just a moment Victoria could have sworn she saw something in the older woman's eyes, not sympathy, not concern, but something that looked almost like anticipation. "Mrs. Blackwood," Elena said softly, her hand on the door handle. Mr. Wellington said to tell you that Mr. Thomas's final wishes are extensive. 7 parts, he said. 7 revelations. She paused at the threshold. He also said you should prepare yourself. Prepare myself for what? Victoria snapped. But Elena was already gone, leaving only the echo of footsteps retreating down the hallway. Victoria stood alone in the bedroom she'd shared with a dead man, wearing a red dress to read his will, holding a phone that connected to no one, and for the first time in 3 days she felt something cold slither down her spine. It wasn't grief, it was the first whisper of fear. The Bentley glided through Manhattan traffic like a shark through dark water, its black exterior reflecting the October sky. Victoria sat in the back, her red dress a splash of defiance against the leather seats. Elena rode in silence beside the driver, that damned wooden box resting on her lap like a coffin for secrets. Madison Avenue rushed past the tinted windows. Boutiques Victoria knew by heart. Restaurants where she'd lunched with women who called themselves friends but kept score like accountants. In 30 minutes she'd be $12 million richer. Then Jake would resurface from wherever he was hiding, and this chapter of her life would finally close. The car pulled up to 590 Madison Avenue, its glass facade reaching toward heaven like a prayer made of steel and ambition. 25 floors up, Marcus Wellington waited with her future wrapped in legal documents. Mrs. Blackwood, Elena said as the driver opened Victoria's door, your children are already here. Of course they were. Michael, always 15 minutes early to everything, as if punctuality could earn him a father's love that had always been rationed out in measured doses. And Sarah, her baby girl who wasn't a baby anymore, probably there to hold her brother's hand through the formalities. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have, each floor counting up like years of her life. 20th floor, 21st. Elena stood perfectly still, that box held against her chest like armor. 23rd, 24th. Ding! The doors opened to Wellington and Associates, where Persian rugs swallowed footsteps and oil paintings of dead judges watched from mahogany walls. Charlotte Webb stood waiting, her navy suit so crisp it could cut glass, her smile professional but somehow wrong, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Mrs. Blackwood, welcome. Everyone is gathered in conference room A. She gestured down the hallway with manicured fingers. If you'll follow me. The walk felt like a funeral procession, their heels clicking against marble in perfect synchronization. Victoria could hear voices through the heavy wooden door. Michael's measured baritone, Sarah's nervous laugh, and another voice. Deeper, unfamiliar yet somehow known. Charlotte opened the door, and Victoria's world tilted. There, sitting at the far end of the conference table like a ghost made flesh, was Robert Blackwood, Thomas's younger brother, the one who'd vanished 20 years ago after his wife's tragic accident, leaving nothing behind but questions and a forwarding address that led nowhere. Hello, Victoria, Robert said, his voice carrying the same Connecticut polish as Thomas's, but underneath something else. Something sharp. It's been a long time, 20 years dissolved in an instant. The last time she'd seen Robert, he'd been screaming at the hospital, Rebecca's blood still on his shirt, accusing everyone and no one of killing his pregnant wife. Then he was gone, evaporated like morning mist, leaving Thomas to handle the estate, the funeral, everything. Robert? The name came out as a whisper. What are you doing here? Father always said family should stick together for the important moments. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And this is definitely important. Michael stood up from his chair, extending his hand to his uncle with the cautious respect of someone approaching a wild animal. Uncle Robert, we thought you were dead? No, nephew, just elsewhere. Processing. Healing. Robert shook Michael's hand, then turned those steel-gray eyes so like Thomas's toward Sarah. And you must be little Sarah, though not so little anymore. Sarah managed a weak smile, clearly overwhelmed. Uncle Rob, I don't really remember you. You were 12 when I left. Understandable. He settled back into his chair with the fluid grace of a predator conserving energy. But we're all here now. One big happy family. Marcus Wellington cleared his throat, his dignified presence commanding the room's attention. 65 years old, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd shepherded hundreds of families through their darkest financial hours. But today, even Marcus looked unsettled. Now that everyone is present, we can begin. He gestured to the massive screen built into the wall. Thomas left very specific instructions for how his will should be read. Very unusual instructions. Charlotte moved to the door, and Victoria heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The electronic whir of locks engaging. Multiple locks. What are you doing? Victoria demanded, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Following Mr. Blackwood's instructions to the letter, Charlotte replied, her earlier nervous energy replaced by something harder, more purposeful. The will stipulates that once we begin, no one leaves this room until all 7 portions have been revealed. 7 portions? Michael asked, his lawyer's instincts already cataloging the irregularities. Marcus, this is highly unusual, possibly illegal. Marcus spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. Thomas's will has been thoroughly vetted. Everything happening here today is entirely legal, if unconventional. He nodded to Charlotte, who dimmed the lights with a remote. The screen flickered to life, and Thomas Blackwood appeared in stunning 4K clarity. He was sitting in his study. Victoria recognized the backdrop immediately. The built-in bookshelves, the architectural awards, the photo of their wedding day that he'd inexplicably kept on his desk even after everything went cold between them. But this Thomas looked different. Gaunt from the cancer that killed him. Yes, but something else. His eyes held a clarity she'd never seen before, like a man who'd finally solved a puzzle that had plagued him for years. "Hello, everyone," Thomas said, his recorded voice filling the room with the authority he'd wielded in life. "If you're watching this, then I'm dead. The cancer finally won, or at least that's what you've been told." Victoria felt ice form in her stomach. What did he mean, been told? Thomas continued, his image leaning forward as if he could see them through the screen. My death, while inevitable, might not have been as natural as it appeared. But that's just one of 7 truths you'll discover today. What the hell is this? Victoria snapped, looking at Marcus. Some kind of sick joke? Please, Mrs. Blackwood, Marcus said quietly. Let him finish. Thomas's image smiled, that thin smile he used when he knew something others didn't. Before you, Marcus should have placed 7 envelopes. Each one contains a piece of a puzzle I've spent 3 years assembling. Each revelation builds on the last, and by the end you'll understand everything why I died, who betrayed whom, and who deserves my fortune. The camera angle shifted slightly, as if Thomas had adjusted it himself. But here's the interesting part. Only the last person standing in that room, the one who can face all 7 truths without running, will inherit everything. $20 million, 3 properties, and answers to questions you haven't even thought to ask yet. Robert laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Theatrical even in death, brother. Bravo. Thomas's image seemed to respond to the interruption. Yes, Robert, I invited you specifically. You deserve to see this. You deserve to know what really happened to Rebecca. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Robert's casual posture went rigid, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Dad! Sarah's voice was small, scared. What are you talking about? Envelope number 1, Thomas commanded from beyond the grave. Marcus, if you would. Marcus picked up the first black envelope with hands that trembled slightly. The sound of paper tearing filled the silence. Elena stepped forward from the corner where she'd been standing, invisible as always, and placed the wooden box marked Veritas on the table with a hollow thunk. Before we begin, Thomas's voice continued, know this, everything I'm about to reveal has been documented, verified, and prepared with legal precision. There's no running from this truth. Charlotte, you may now secure the room. Charlotte moved to a panel on the wall, entering a code that triggered another series of locks. The window's smart glass opaqued, turning the conference room into a sealed confessional. 7 truths, Thomas said, his dead eyes boring into them from the screen. 7 envelopes. 7 chances for redemption or damnation. Let's find out which one you've earned, shall we? The screen went black for a moment. Then Thomas reappeared, holding up a photograph. Victoria and a man whose face was deliberately blurred. Let's start with the simplest truth, shall we? His smile was razor-sharp. Victoria, my devoted wife, let me tell you about your lover, the man you call Jake Morrison. Envelope 1, Marcus. Show them who Jake really is, or more accurately, who he isn't. Marcus's voice was steady as he read, but Victoria could see the paper shaking in his hands. The game had begun, and suddenly $12 million felt like the least important thing in the room. Marcus Wellington's fingers hesitated on the 3rd envelope, black as a coffin nail against the polished conference table. The first 2 revelations had been damaging. Evidence of Victoria's 3-year affair, financial records showing $800,000 hemorrhaging from family accounts to maintain her secret life. But Thomas's recorded voice promised this 3rd envelope would change everything. Before we continue, Thomas spoke from the screen, his cancer-hollowed face somehow more alive than when he'd been breathing. I want everyone to understand that what you're about to learn took me 18 months and considerable resources to uncover. Marcus, please read the Blackwater report. Marcus withdrew a thick manila folder from the envelope. the Blackwater Investigations logo embossed in silver on its cover. His eyes scanned the first page, and Victoria watched the color drain from his face like water from a broken glass. "This is a comprehensive investigation report dated 6 months ago," Marcus began, his professional composure cracking at the edges. "Subject of investigation: Jake Morrison, supposedly age 32, tennis instructor at Greenfield Country Club." He paused, adjusted his reading glasses. "Finding number 1. The real Jake Morrison died in a vehicular accident on Highway 101 in California 5 years ago." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Victoria's hand moved to her throat, fingers finding the diamond necklace Jake had given her for their second anniversary. Their second anniversary of what? Of lies? "That's impossible," she breathed. But even as the words left her mouth, pieces were clicking together in horrible ways. Jake's reluctance to be photographed, his insistence on cash transactions, the way he'd never introduced her to family or friends. Marcus continued reading, each word a nail in the coffin of Victoria's carefully constructed fantasy. Death certificate attached. See Appendix A. The deceased Jake Morrison was survived by his parents, William and Margaret Morrison of Pasadena. No connection to Connecticut. Never worked as a tennis instructor. "Then who?" Sarah started. But Marcus raised a hand for silence. Finding number 2. Security footage analysis from Greenfield Country Club. Various hotels and restaurants over a 3-year period. Marcus turned the page, revealing a grid of grainy photographs. The subject identifying himself as Jake Morrison appears in over 200 hours of footage. But, and Blackwater's analysts were very specific about this, not a single frame shows his face clearly. Every image is either profile, back-turned, obscured by hats or sunglasses, or mysteriously corrupted at crucial moments. Charlotte Webb stepped forward, connecting a laptop to the screen. Thomas's image minimized to the corner as security footage began to play. There was Victoria at the country club restaurant, laughing with a man whose face was turned away from the camera. Victoria in a hotel lobby, kissing someone whose features were hidden by a baseball cap. Victoria in her car, her passenger's face obscured by strategic positioning. "He played you like a violin." Robert's voice cut through the silence, sharp with 20 years of suppressed rage. "And you never even saw his face clearly on camera. Tell me, Victoria, in all those intimate moments, did you ever wonder why he was so camera-shy? Or were you too busy spending my brother's money on your phantom lover?" Victoria's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, stabbing at Jake's contact for the dozenth time that day. The mechanical voice was merciless. "The number you have dialed is not in service." "Try again," she muttered, redialing. "There has to be a mistake." "There's no mistake," Thomas's recorded voice interrupted. "The man you've been seeing for 3 years doesn't exist, at least not as Jake Morrison. The question you should be asking yourself, Victoria, is why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to seduce you? What could they possibly want?" Michael had been silent until now, processing information with his lawyer's mind. But as Victoria fumbled with her phone, something else caught his attention. Her purse had tipped over in her panic, its contents spilling across the table. Among the lipstick and credit cards, a small prescription bottle rolled free. He picked it up before she could react, reading the label. "Mom, what is this? Digoxin. This isn't your heart medication." Victoria snatched for the bottle, but Michael held it out of reach, his face hardening. "This is a high-dose cardiac glycoside. You don't have a heart condition. Why would you have?" His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. "Finding number 3, Marcus continued, his voice now barely above a whisper. Blackwater's investigators noted unusual patterns in the subject's behavior. He appeared to be following a script, asking specific questions about family finances, health conditions, and notably about Thomas Blackwood's cancer diagnosis and treatment schedule." The footage on the screen changed to show Victoria and her mystery man at a cafe. Audio crackling to life. Somehow, Blackwater had managed to capture sound. "How's Tom doing?" the man's voice asked, distorted but audible. "Still going to those Wednesday chemo sessions." "Every Wednesday, 2 to 6, Victoria's recorded voice replied. "Like clockwork. He's so weak afterward, can barely make it upstairs." Robert stood slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. "So let me understand this, sister-in-law. You were having an affair with a ghost. A ghost who knew exactly when my brother would be most vulnerable. A ghost who had you carrying heart medication you don't need." He moved closer to Victoria, each step measured, predatory. "Tell me, when did you start putting that medication in Thomas's food? Before or after your phantom lover suggested it?" I wouldn't." Victoria's protests died as Thomas's face reappeared on the screen. full size now, his smile terrible in its certainty. "Envelope 4 will explain the medication," he said, as if he could hear the conversation in the room. "But first, Victoria, I want you to understand something. You haven't been having an affair, you've been played, manipulated, used. The question is, by whom? And more importantly, why didn't I stop it?" The screen went dark for a moment. Then Thomas reappeared, holding a chess piece, a queen, Victoria noticed with sick irony. "Because, my dear wife, sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to let them think they're the one doing the hunting." The electronic locks disengaged with a sound like bones breaking. Everyone in the room turned toward the door, the sudden intrusion jarring after 45 minutes of being sealed inside with Thomas's revelations. Charlotte Webb stood frozen, her hands still on the control panel, confusion clear on her face. "I didn't unlock it," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The system shouldn't allow." The door swung open, and there he stood, Jake Morrison, or the man Victoria had believed was Jake Morrison for 3 years. 6 feet of sculpted muscle in a Tom Ford suit that Victoria had bought him for his birthday. His fake birthday, she realized with a sick twist in her stomach. His dark hair caught the light, that same carefully tousled look that had first caught her attention at the country club. Those green eyes that had looked at her with such passion, such devotion, such perfectly performed love. "Jake!" The name tore from Victoria's throat, part relief, part accusation, part desperate hope that everything she'd just learned was some elaborate lie. She lunged forward, her red dress a blur of motion, all her upper-class composure evaporating like morning dew under a blowtorch. "Oh, thank God! Tell them! Tell them about us! Tell them you're real!" She reached for him, hands grasping at his suit jacket like a drowning woman clutching at driftwood. But he stepped back, just out of reach, and something in his expression made her freeze. It wasn't the loving look she knew. It wasn't even cold. It was apologetic? "Hello, Victoria," he said, and even his voice sounded different. The slight southern drawl she'd found so charming was gone, replaced by something more neutral, more theatrical. "I'm afraid we need to talk. What are you doing?" Victoria's voice climbed toward hysteria. "Tell them who you are. Tell them about Maldives, about our plans, about the baby we were going to." "There was never going to be a baby," he interrupted, reaching up to his face. "I had a vasectomy 10 years ago. Just one of many facts not in my character bio." His fingers found an edge along his jawline that shouldn't have existed and pulled. The meticulously groomed beard came away in one piece, revealing a younger, cleaner jaw underneath. Next came the hairpiece, not his full head of hair, but strategic additions that had aged him up, changed his hairline, transformed him from a 28-year-old struggling actor into a 32-year-old tennis instructor. The transformation took less than 30 seconds, but it destroyed 3 years in an instant. "No," Victoria whispered, then louder. "No, this isn't your Jake. We made love. We talked about marriage after Thomas died. You said you loved me." David, because that's who he was now, had always been, set the prosthetics on the conference table with the care of an actor handling his props. "My name is David Morrison, no relation to the real Jake Morrison who died 5 years ago. Though I did know his father. William Morrison was my acting coach at Juilliard before I dropped out. Small world, isn't it?" He moved further into the room, each step measured, theatrical. This was his grand performance, his closing act after 3 years of method acting so deep he'd sometimes forgotten who he really was. 3 years ago," David continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a monologue he'd rehearsed, "I was nobody, a failed Broadway actor, 2 months behind on rent, serving drinks at a bar in Hell's Kitchen. Then Marcus Wellington walked in with an offer that sounded like fiction. A 3-year immersive performance. 200 pages of character backstory, complete with childhood memories, favorite foods, sexual preferences, everything I needed to become Jake Morrison, tennis instructor and perfect lover." He pulled a thick manila folder from inside his jacket, pages worn from constant reference. "Thomas wrote it all. Every conversation we'd have, every story I'd tell you about my fictional childhood in Savannah, every preference and opinion designed to make me irresistible to you specifically. He knew you better than you know yourself, Victoria. Your attraction to younger men who need saving, your weakness for southern accents because of that romance novelist you loved, your sexual preferences learned from 15 years of marriage. It's all here." Victoria's shift from shock to rage happened in a heartbeat. The confused, betrayed woman evaporated, replaced by something harder, more desperate, more dangerous. "You're lying. The things we shared, the intimacy, you can't fake that." "Can't I?" David pulled out his phone, swiped to a voice recording app. Victoria's voice filled the room, breathy and intimate. "Oh, Jake, I've never felt this way before, not even with Thomas when we were young. You make me feel alive. Stop it, Victoria screamed, but David continued, his finger hovering over the play button. 512 hours of recorded conversations, every meeting, every phone call, every whispered confession in the dark. Would you like to hear the part where you described how Rebecca Blackwood's death wasn't really an accident? Or perhaps when you explained how you'd been slowly increasing Thomas's medication doses? The room went silent at those words. Robert's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. Sarah gasped. Michael looked between his mother and uncle, pieces of a 20-year puzzle suddenly falling into place. You recorded us during— Sarah couldn't finish the sentence, her face green with disgust. Not those moments, David said with a slight grimace. I'm an actor, not a pornographer, but every conversation before and after, every pillow talk confession, every plan she made for after Thomas died, all recorded, all documented, all legal under Connecticut's one-party consent law. Victoria's hand dove into her purse, the same purse that had spilled earlier, but not everything had fallen out. The knife appeared in her hand like a magic trick, 6 inches of German steel that she'd carried since a mugging attempt 5 years ago. Or so she'd told people. The blade caught the light as she lunged not at David, but at the USB drive he'd just produced from his pocket. You lying son of a bitch, she screamed, all pretense of refinement gone. Give me that. You can't. This is entrapment. This is illegal. Thomas is dead. You can't do this. But David had stage combat training, 6 months of it for a production of Macbeth he'd never gotten to perform. He pivoted, using her momentum against her, and she stumbled past him. The knife swung wild, and for a moment it looked like she might turn it on herself or someone else. Then Sarah moved. Sweet, quiet Sarah, who'd been her mother's baby, her princess, her consolation prize when Thomas became distant. Sarah, who'd never raised her voice, never rebelled, never chosen sides. She grabbed Victoria's wrist with both hands, using a self-defense move she'd learned in college but never thought she'd need against her own mother. Mom, stop! Sarah's voice broke with emotion. Please, just stop! Can't you see what's happening? Can't you see what you've become? The struggle was brief but vicious. Victoria tried to wrench free, her red dress tearing at the shoulder seam. Sarah, baby, let go! You don't understand. They're setting me up. Your father and his brother. They planned this whole thing to what, Mom? Sarah's tears ran freely now, but her grip remained firm. To expose the truth? To show us who you really are? Because right now, I'm starting to think I never knew you at all. Michael stepped in, his larger hands closing over both of theirs, and together the siblings wrestled the knife away from their mother. It clattered to the floor, spinning away across the marble until Charlotte stopped it with her foot, kicking it further out of reach. Victoria collapsed into a chair, her perfectly styled hair now wild, her makeup smeared, the red dress torn and disheveled. She looked like what she was, exposed, defeated, but still dangerous in her desperation. Thomas's voice filled the silence from the screen. He'd been waiting, Victoria realized with growing horror. The video was somehow synchronized, responding to the action in the room. How much had he planned? How much had he foreseen? Thank you for joining us, David, Thomas said from beyond the grave. Your performance was flawless. Every director on Broadway who rejected you was a fool. But before we continue, there's something else everyone needs to know. Marcus, please open envelope 4. It's time everyone understood the real partnership behind this revelation. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the 4th envelope. Inside was a single document, notarized and witnessed, along with a series of photographs. His eyes widened as he read. This is a contract dated 3 years ago, Marcus announced, his professional voice barely maintaining control. Between Thomas Blackwood and— He paused, looked up at Robert, then back at the paper. Robert Blackwood, Joint Operation Codename Veritas. Purpose: to investigate and document the murder of Rebecca Blackwood and bring her killer to justice. Robert stood slowly, his movement deliberate, predatory. The grieving brother-in-law was gone. In his place stood someone who'd waited 20 years for this moment. Surprise, Victoria, Robert said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of planning. You thought you were playing chess with a dying man, but Thomas wasn't your only opponent. We've been working together since the day he got his diagnosis. The cancer gave us a timeline, a deadline, 3 years to gather everything we needed. He walked to the screen where Thomas's frozen image waited. My brother knew he was dying. The doctors gave him 18 months, but he stretched it to 3 years through sheer will. Not to live, but to gather evidence, to build an airtight case, to ensure you'd pay for what you did to Rebecca. David cleared his throat, drawing attention back to himself. I should clarify something. The 500,000 Thomas paid me? I only kept 100,000, enough to pay my debts and start fresh. The rest went into a trust fund for someone special. Someone who deserved it more than I did. He looked directly at Elena, who hadn't moved from her corner, still clutching the wooden box marked Veritas. Elena Rodriguez, David continued, or should I say Elena Rebecca Blackwood, Robert's daughter, Rebecca's daughter, the baby who survived when her mother was pushed down those stairs 20 years ago. The temperature in the room plummeted. Victoria's face went from red to white so fast it looked like special effects. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no words coming out. That's impossible, Victoria finally whispered. Rebecca was alone when she fell. It was an accident. The police said what you told them to say. Robert cut in, moving closer to Victoria with each word. You were alone with my 7 months pregnant wife. She'd discovered your affair with the contractor. Threatened to tell Thomas. You argued at the top of the stairs. You pushed her, but what you didn't know was that our unborn daughter survived the fall. The doctors performed an emergency C-section. Elena lived, even though Rebecca didn't. Elena stepped forward, setting the Veritas box on the table with deliberate care. When she spoke, 20 years of suppressed rage colored every word. I was raised by the Morrison family, William's parents, while my father Robert disappeared to protect me. When I turned 15, he finally told me the truth, told me who killed my mother, and together we made a plan. She opened the box with reverent hands, revealing its contents. A blood-stained scarf, the one Rebecca had been wearing when she fell. A set of photographs from the original crime scene, and a small digital recorder. For 20 years, Elena continued, I've been in your house, serving you coffee each morning, cleaning your bedroom, washing your clothes, listening to every conversation you had when you thought you were alone, every phone call, every cruel comment about my father's family, every lie you told. I heard it all. I recorded what I could, and I waited. We all waited. We all waited. She pressed play on the recorder. Victoria's voice from just 6 months ago filled the room. Never should have come to the house that day. If Rebecca had just minded her own business, she'd still be alive. But no, she had to play the moral crusader, threatening to tell Thomas about the contractor. As if her perfect marriage gave her the right to judge mine. That push was practically self-defense. Turn it off! Victoria shrieked, lunging for the recorder, but Michael held her back. That's taken out of context. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You meant every word, Robert said coldly. Just like you meant to push her. Just like you meant to increase Thomas's medication. Just like you meant to inherit everything and run off with your actor boyfriend here. David laughed, sharp and bitter. About that I should mention, Victoria, I'm gay. Have been my whole life. My partner Charles and I have been together for 8 years. Every intimate moment between us required me to think about my mortgage payment to get through it. You were literally a job I had to close my eyes and endure. The final humiliation was too much. Victoria crumbled, her sobs ugly and raw, nothing like the delicate tears she'd performed at Thomas's funeral. But even in her breakdown, her eyes darted around the room, calculating, looking for an angle, an escape, a way to spin this in her favor. Thomas's image came to life again on the screen, as if he could see her even now. We're only halfway through, Victoria. 4 more envelopes, 4 more truths, and the worst is yet to come. Because you see, the poison you thought you were giving me, the doses you were so carefully increasing, well, let's just say Elena is quite talented at switching pills. Envelope 5, Marcus. Show her what she's really been taking. Marcus Wellington's fingers trembled as he opened the 5th envelope. The weight of what they'd already discovered sat heavy in the room. Victoria's affair with a hired actor, the truth about Rebecca's death, Elena's real identity, but Thomas's recorded voice promised this revelation would cut deeper than all the others combined. Before we proceed, Thomas spoke from the screen, his gaunt face somehow more animated in death than it had been in his final months of life. I want everyone to understand that what you're about to learn was discovered quite by accident. Charlotte, would you please explain your real qualifications? Charlotte Webb stepped forward from where she'd been standing by the door, her demeanor shifting from nervous assistant to something far more professional, more clinical. She removed her decorative glasses, revealing sharp, intelligent eyes that had been watching everything with the precision of a scientist observing an experiment. My name is Dr. Charlotte Webb, she began, her voice carrying new authority. I hold dual degrees in forensic pathology and toxicology from Johns Hopkins. For the past year, I've been working undercover in Marcus's firm at Thomas's request, monitoring certain biological markers in this room's occupants. Victoria's hand went to her throat. You've been watching me? Watching, testing, documenting, Charlotte confirmed, producing a tablet from her briefcase. 3 months ago, during your last visit to sign estate documents, I collected several samples. Hair from your coat. You shed quite prolifically, Mrs. Blackwood. Saliva from the coffee cup you drank from. And thanks to David's intimate access, blood samples from the diabetes testing kit you didn't know you were using. What diabetes kit? Victoria's voice cracked. I don't have diabetes. David raised his hand with mock apology. Remember that romantic evening 6 months ago when I suggested we get tested together? For STDs, I said. Just to be safe. The home testing kit I brought was actually a comprehensive blood panel kit. You thought you were being responsible. You were actually being diagnosed. Charlotte connected her tablet to the main screen, and Thomas's image minimized to make room for medical charts, blood work results, and chemical formulas that looked like modern hieroglyphics to everyone except Charlotte herself. Mrs. Blackwood, Charlotte said, her tone shifting to that of a doctor delivering terminal news, your blood shows significant levels of thallium sulfate, commonly known as inheritance powder or the poisoner's poison, tasteless, odorless, and virtually undetectable without specific testing. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Victoria's face cycled through emotions, confusion, denial, then dawning horror. That's impossible, she whispered, then louder. That's impossible. I haven't. No one would. The levels indicate chronic exposure over approximately 6 months, Charlotte continued, swiping through charts on the screen. The concentration patterns suggest daily ingestion, likely through food or drink. Small doses carefully measured, designed to build up slowly in your system. She pulled up a comparison chart. See this progression? January, negligible. February, trace amounts. By March, measurable quantities. April, May, June, each month the accumulation increases. You're currently at about 60% of a lethal dose. Another 3 months at this rate, and your organs would begin shutting down irreversibly. Victoria's hands flew to her hair, the expensive extensions she'd had to get when her natural hair started falling out 3 months ago. Her fingers trembled, and everyone could see it now, the tremor she'd been hiding, attributing to stress from Thomas's death. The symptoms, Victoria breathed, understanding flooding her features. My hair falling out, I thought it was stress. The trembling hands, I said it was too much coffee. The memory lapses, classic thallium poisoning symptoms, Charlotte confirmed. Also the numbness in your feet you mentioned to David, the insomnia, the metallic taste you complained about last month. All textbook indicators that someone has been slowly, methodically poisoning you. Michael stood up, his lawyer's mind already racing. If father died 8 months ago, he couldn't have been poisoning her for the last 6 months. Precisely, Thomas's voice interjected from his corner of the screen. I've been dead longer than Victoria's been dying. So the question becomes, who's been seasoning your meals with inheritance powder, my dear wife? All eyes turned to Robert, who sat perfectly still in his chair, that thin smile playing at his lips like a cat who'd cornered a particularly interesting mouse. But he said nothing, just watched Victoria's world crumble with the patience of someone who'd waited 20 years for this moment. It was you, Victoria pointed at Robert, her voice rising. You've been poisoning me. You wanted revenge for Rebecca. Robert laughed, low and dark. Oh, Victoria, if I wanted you dead, you'd have been in the ground 20 years ago. No, poisoning isn't my style. Too impersonal. Too merciful. Then who? Victoria spun around, looking at each face in the room. Her children backed away from her, their own horror evident. Elena? You've been in my house making my food. Alina stepped forward, the Veritas box still in her hands like a talisman. For 20 years I've served you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Made your coffee exactly how you like it. 2 sugars, oat milk, served at precisely 160 degrees. If I wanted to poison you, Mrs. Victoria, would I have waited 20 years to start? She set the box down with deliberate care, her movements careful, controlled, nothing like the subservient housekeeper Victoria had known. Do you remember the morning Rebecca died? Alina's voice carried an edge that could cut glass. January 15th, 2004. You called her to the house while Mr. Thomas was at a construction site in Hartford. You said you wanted to clear the air about the contractor situation. That was 20 years ago, Victoria protested weakly. It was an accident. Let me paint you a picture, Alina continued, her accent thickening with emotion. My mother, 7 months pregnant with me, climbing those stairs to the 2nd floor because you insisted on talking in private. You stood at the top, blocking her way. She tried to leave when you became aggressive. You grabbed her arm. She pulled away, and then she fell. Victoria screamed. She lost her balance and fell. I tried to catch her. You pushed her. Alina's words were bullets, each one finding its mark. I know because she didn't die immediately. She lived for 3 hours in the hospital, long enough to tell the nurses what really happened. But you'd already gotten to the police, hadn't you? Already spinning your story about the tragic accident, the slippery carpet, the unfortunate timing. Charlotte pulled up another document on the screen, a medical report from Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, dated 20 years ago. The original medical examination showed defensive wounds on Rebecca's arms. Charlotte read clinically. Bruising consistent with grabbing, not falling. The angle of impact suggested a push rather than a slip. But the final police report somehow omitted these details. Because Victoria's family had connections, Robert finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of suppressed rage. The Sterling family had judges, prosecutors, police commissioners in their pocket. One pregnant woman's death was easy to sweep under the rug, especially when the grieving widower me was too destroyed to fight back immediately. Victoria looked around the room wildly, her eyes finally landing on the one person she thought might still be her ally. Sarah, sweetheart. You believe me, don't you? You know I would never. But Sarah had moved to stand beside Michael, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I found the insurance papers in your desk when I was 16. The life insurance policy on Rebecca Blackwood. $500,000 with you as the beneficiary. Why would you have life insurance on Uncle Robert's wife? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Thomas's recorded image seemed to be waiting for Victoria's answer. It was a business arrangement, Victoria stammered. Rebecca was going to be a partner in my interior design firm. We needed insurance for all partners, a firm that never existed, Michael said flatly. I checked the business registration records after Dad got sick. You never filed any paperwork, never registered any partnership, but you did collect that insurance money 3 weeks after Rebecca died. Charlotte swiped to a new screen. Bank records from 20 years ago. $500,000 deposited into Victoria Sterling Blackwood's personal account, February 5, 2004. The same day she bought a new Mercedes and booked a spa retreat to Arizona. You celebrated. Elena's voice was poison itself. My mother's body wasn't even cold and you were spending her life insurance money on luxuries. Victoria's legs gave out and she collapsed into a chair, her red dress pooling around her like blood. The tremor in her hands was pronounced now. Whether from the thallium or from fear was impossible to tell. But if none of you are poisoning me, she whispered, the reality of her situation finally sinking in, then who? Thomas's face filled the screen again, his smile terrible in its satisfaction. Oh, Victoria, haven't you figured it out yet? After all these months of symptoms, all these careful doses, you still don't know who's been slowly killing you. He paused, savoring the moment he'd orchestrated from beyond the grave. Tell me, my dear wife, who pours your evening tea every single night? Who insists you drink it all because it's good for your digestion? Who's been so devoted, so caring, so concerned about your health these past 6 months? The blood drained from Victoria's face as the final piece clicked into place. Her head turned slowly, mechanically toward the one person she'd never suspected. The one person she'd trusted above all others in her final betrayal of Thomas. No, she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. It can't be. Thomas's laugh echoed through the conference room, cold and satisfied, the sound of a dead man's victory. Envelope 6, Marcus. Let's show Victoria who her real poisoner is, though I suspect she's finally figured it out. Haven't you, my dear? You know exactly who's been putting thallium in your chamomile tea every single night for the past 6 months. Marcus Wellington's hands visibly shook as he reached for the 6th envelope. 5 revelations had already destroyed Victoria's world. The fake lover, the murder confession, Elena's identity, the poison in her veins. But something about this 6th envelope felt different, heavier, final. Before we open this, Thomas's voice commanded from the screen, I want everyone to understand that what you're about to see broke my heart. Not because of what was being done, but because of why it was necessary. Charlotte, please prepare the video feed from the kitchen surveillance. The main screen split into multiple panels, each showing different angles of the Blackwood Mansion's kitchen. Timestamps dated back 6 months, synchronized to begin playing simultaneously. The familiar marble countertops, the professional-grade stove Victoria had insisted on but rarely used, the breakfast nook where the family used to gather before everything fell apart. January 15th, Thomas's voice narrated as the footage began. 6 months ago, exactly 20 years to the day after Rebecca Blackwood's death. Watch the person making tea. The figure in the kitchen moved with practiced familiarity, reaching for the ceramic teapot, the one Victoria's mother had given her for her wedding. But it wasn't Elena's familiar form. It wasn't Robert seeking revenge. The person carefully measuring loose-leaf chamomile tea into the strainer was Sarah. Sweet, loyal Sarah. Her father's princess. Her mother's baby. No, Victoria breathed. the word barely audible. That's not, she wouldn't syrup. Sarah opened a small vial, no bigger than a perfume sample. She tapped it carefully over the teapot. 3 taps, precise, measured. Then she stirred counterclockwise, exactly 7 times, before pouring the tea into Victoria's favorite china cup, the one with hand-painted roses. The camera angle changed, showing Sarah carrying the cup upstairs, her face calm, almost serene. Another angle showed her entering Victoria's bedroom, where Victoria sat at her vanity, removing jewelry after another evening out with Jake. "Your tea, mother?" Sarah's recorded voice was warm, caring. "Drink it while it's hot. You know it helps you sleep better." The Victoria on screen took the cup without looking, without suspecting, without knowing she was drinking poison from her own daughter's hands. Every night, Charlotte commented clinically, fast-forwarding through dozens of similar scenes. For 6 months, 3 taps of thallium sulfate. The consistency is remarkable. She never missed a dose, never varied the amount. That takes extraordinary discipline. Sarah stood up from her chair, and for the first time since the revelations began, she looked completely composed. Gone was the crying girl who'd wrestled the knife from her mother's hand. In her place stood someone Victoria had never truly seen before. Someone calculating, patient, methodical. Someone who could poison her own mother for half a year while smiling at breakfast every morning. "Hello, Mother," Sarah said, her voice carrying none of its usual warmth. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. After all, you taught me everything I know about survival, about taking what you want, about eliminating obstacles." "Sarah, baby, why?" Victoria's voice cracked, reaching toward her daughter with trembling hands. "I'm your mother. I love you. I've given you everything. Everything." Sarah laughed, but it wasn't her laugh. It was harder, colder, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "You gave me lies, Mother. A childhood built on blood money from Rebecca's insurance. A father who retreated into his work because he couldn't stand to look at his wife. And then when I finally found someone I could love, you took him too." David shifted uncomfortably at those words. Sarah's eyes found his, and something passed between them that made Victoria's stomach turn. "You knew," Victoria whispered, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "You knew David wasn't really Jake. You knew, and I knew from the beginning," Sarah confirmed. "Uncle Robert approached me a year ago, told me everything. About Rebecca. About Dad's diagnosis. About the plan to expose you. And about David Morrison, the actor who'd need a handler. Someone to help him maintain his cover." She moved closer to David, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the attention. "I was supposed to just feed him information about you, help him play his role better. But then I got to know him. The real him. Not the character he was playing for you. Funny, intelligent, kind David. And I fell in love. But he's gay," Victoria spat out desperately. "He said he's gay." David cleared his throat, his discomfort now evident to everyone. "I am gay, Victoria. What Sarah and I have is complicated. She knows I can't love her the way she wants, but she doesn't care. I'll take whatever piece of him I can have," Sarah said simply. "Even if it's just friendship, even if it's just existing in the same space. That's what real love looks like, Mother. Accepting someone as they are, not trying to force them into what you need them to be." Robert stood up, moving to stand beside Sarah, like a general acknowledging his best soldier. "Your daughter came to me with the poisoning idea. I was going to handle things more directly. But Sarah convinced me this was poetic justice. Victoria would die slowly, mysteriously, just like Thomas did. Only Thomas died of cancer, while Victoria would die of her own daughter's patient hatred. "You sanctimonious bastard," Victoria snarled at Robert. "You think you're so noble, avenging your dead wife, but you're using my daughter as a weapon." "I'm not using anyone," Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. "This was my choice, my plan. Uncle Robert just provided the thallium. Did you know it's surprisingly easy to obtain if you know the right people? Industrial suppliers sell it for manufacturing. A few forged documents, a shell company, and suddenly you have enough poison to kill someone 10 times over." Michael had been silent through all of this, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Now he stood, looking at his sister with a mixture of horror and betrayal. "Sarah, how could you?" His voice broke on her name. "She's our mother. Whatever she's done, she's still our mother." "Is she?" Sarah turned to her brother, and for a moment her composure cracked, showing the pain underneath. "Was she our mother when she was cheating on Dad while he was dying? Was she our mother when she killed our aunt and unborn cousin? Was she our mother when she spent our inheritance on her boy toy?" She pulled out her phone, swiping to a saved voicemail. Victoria's voice filled the room, slurred from wine, dated 3 months ago. "Sarah, darling, I won't be home for dinner again. Jake and I are going to that new restaurant in Tribeca. Use your credit card if you need something. Oh, and don't wait up. I might stay at his place. You understand, don't you? A woman has needs, even if your father couldn't meet them anymore. That was the night Dad was in the hospital, Sarah said quietly. His white blood cell count had crashed. The doctors didn't think he'd make it through the night. Michael, you were there with him, holding his hand, and our mother was at a restaurant planning her new life with her fake boyfriend. I remember that night, Michael whispered, his voice hollow. Dad kept asking for her. He wanted to see her one last time. I called her 17 times. She never answered. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Do you know what Dad told me before he died, Michael? He said, take care of your mother. She's going to need you. Even knowing what she'd done, even knowing she was betraying him, he still wanted us to protect her. That's the kind of man he was. She turned back to face the room. But I'm not that noble. I'm my mother's daughter, after all. I learned from the best how to smile while holding a knife behind your back, how to serve poison with a kiss on the cheek, how to destroy someone while telling them you love them. Thomas's image reappeared on the screen, and when he spoke, his voice carried infinite sadness. I knew what Sarah was doing by the third week. The cameras in the kitchen aren't as hidden as she thought. But I didn't stop her. Do you want to know why, Victoria? He paused, as if actually waiting for an answer from beyond the grave. Because I was dying anyway. Because Sarah needed to do this for her own closure. And because, my dear wife, you earned every sip of that poisoned tea, every tremor in your hands, every clump of hair on your pillow. You earned it all 20 years ago when you pushed a pregnant woman down the stairs and then spent her life insurance money on yourself. But mostly, Thomas continued, his recorded eyes seeming to look directly at Victoria, I didn't stop her because I wanted you to know how it feels. To be betrayed by someone you trust completely. To have your body fail you bit by bit. To realize too late that the person bringing you comfort is actually bringing you death. You knew, Victoria screamed at the screen at her dead husband's image. You knew your own daughter was poisoning me and you let her? What kind of father does that? The kind whose wife murdered his sister-in-law and unborn niece, Thomas replied, as if he could hear her. The kind who watched his wife steal money meant for their children's future to spend on affairs. The kind who knew his wife was planning to increase his morphine dose to speed up his death. Oh yes, Victoria, I knew about that too. The syringes you hid in your jewelry box? I found them. Tested them. You were going to kill me, but the cancer beat you to it. Victoria turned back to Sarah, tears streaming down her face, mascara creating black rivers on her cheeks. Please, Sarah, I'm your mother. I made mistakes, yes, but I love you. I've always loved you. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small vial, identical to the one shown in the video. She set it on the table with a soft click. This is the antidote, she said simply. Prussian blue. It binds to thallium and removes it from your system. Start taking it now and you'll recover fully within 3 months. The hair will grow back. The tremors will stop. You'll live. Hope flared in Victoria's eyes as she reached for the vial, but Sarah's hand covered it first. But here's the thing, Mother. You taught me that everything has a price. So what's your life worth to you? Because I want something in exchange for this antidote. Anything, Victoria gasped. Money? The house? I'll sign it all over to you. I don't want your money, Sarah said softly. I want you to confess. On camera. Right now. Tell everyone how you killed Rebecca. Tell them about the insurance money. Tell them about every lie, every betrayal, every crime you've committed. Charlotte will record it. It will be legally admissible. You'll go to prison for murder, but you'll be alive. Prison. Victoria's face went white. Sarah, I can't. Or, Sarah added, sliding the vial across the table where it stopped just out of Victoria's reach, you can maintain your innocence, keep your secrets, and in 3 months, maybe less, your organs will shut down one by one. Your kidneys first. That's already starting, isn't it? Then your liver. Finally, your heart. It's an agonizing death, Mother. I've done my research. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and Victoria's ragged breathing. Everyone waited, watching the woman in the red dress calculate her options, weigh her pride against her life. Marcus Wellington still held the 7th envelope, unopened, his hands trembling. Whatever was in that final revelation, it would have to wait, because right now, in this moment, Victoria Blackwood had to make the most important decision of her life, truth or death. And somewhere in the corner of the screen, Thomas's frozen image seemed to smile, waiting for his final moment of revelation. Marcus Wellington's trembling fingers broke the seal on the 7th envelope. 6 revelations had already torn the Blackwood family apart. Lies, murder, poison, betrayal spanning 2 decades. But Thomas had saved something for last. something that would redefine everything they thought they knew about inheritance, justice, and redemption. Before you read that, Marcus, Thomas's voice commanded from the screen, his image somehow more alive now than in his final months. I want everyone to understand that this final document was written exactly 1 week before my death. I knew the cancer would take me within days. My mind was clear, my intentions absolute. What you're about to read is not the rambling of a dying man. It's the calculated justice of someone who had 3 years to plan the perfect ending. Marcus unfolded the document, his professional composure cracking as he scanned the first page. This is a completely new will. It supersedes everything filed previously. Read it, Robert commanded, his voice steady as granite. Marcus adjusted his glasses, his voice taking on the formal cadence of legal documentation. Last will and testament of Thomas Edmund Blackwood, dated 8 months and 1 week ago. I, being of sound mind and body, despite my terminal diagnosis, hereby revoke all previous wills and declare this to be my final testament. He paused, looked up at the room, then continued. The entirety of my estate, all liquid assets, properties, investments, and holdings totaling approximately $20 million, is to be transferred to the Rebecca Morrison Blackwood Foundation, a charitable trust established in memory of Rebecca Blackwood, who died January 15, 2004. Victoria's scream pierced the air. You can't do this. I'm his wife. I have rights. Community property. 40 years of marriage. There's a condition, Marcus continued, raising his voice over Victoria's protests. Victoria Sterling Blackwood may contest this will and claim her statutory share as surviving spouse, but only if she can prove in a court of law that she had no involvement in the death of Rebecca Blackwood. If she is found guilty of murder or manslaughter, or if she refuses to stand trial, she forfeits all claims to the estate. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria could fight for the money, but only by risking a murder trial with all the evidence they'd gathered. Or she could walk away with nothing but her freedom. Furthermore, Marcus read on, the foundation will be administered by Robert Blackwood, and he paused, his eyes widening, Alina Rebecca Blackwood, the surviving daughter of Robert and Rebecca Blackwood. The room turned to Elena, who stepped forward from her corner, no longer the invisible servant, but revealed as the hidden heir to this twisted legacy. She reached into the Veritas box one final time, pulling out a birth certificate, yellowed with age. My name is Elena Rebecca Blackwood, she said, her accent finally making sense, not foreign, just carefully cultivated to hide her identity. Born January 15, 2004, at 11:47 p.m. My mother died at 11:53. I lived because the doctors performed an emergency cesarean section while she was still technically alive. 6 minutes. That's how long I knew my mother. She held up a photograph. Rebecca Blackwood, beautiful and pregnant, standing at the top of a staircase. The same staircase where she would die 3 days after the photo was taken. For 20 years, I've lived under different names, in different homes, always watching, always waiting. When I turned 15, my father finally told me the truth, told me who killed my mother. And together we made a plan. Not just for revenge, but for justice. Thomas's image stirred on the screen, his final message beginning to play. If you're watching this part, then everything has been revealed. Victoria, you know what you did. Sarah, you know what you've done. Michael, you know what you must do. And Robert, old friend, brother, you know this was the only way. He leaned forward in the recording as if he could see them all through time and death. I knew I was dying 3 years ago. The doctors gave me 18 months, but I stretched it to 3 years through sheer will. Not to live, but to prepare. Every piece of evidence, every revelation, every moment of today was orchestrated. Even my death was timed. I stopped treatment 1 month early to ensure I'd die before Victoria could implement her own plans. You killed yourself? Michael's voice was hollow, broken. I chose my exit, Thomas corrected from the screen. Just as I chose everything else. The cancer was killing me anyway. I just made sure Victoria didn't get the satisfaction of doing it herself. The screen shifted to show Thomas in his study, but this time the camera pulled back to reveal the full scene. Robert sat beside him. Elena stood in the background. Even Charlotte Webb was there, taking notes. This was never about one man's revenge, Thomas continued. This was about justice for Rebecca, about protecting future victims. The Rebecca Blackwood Foundation will provide legal aid to women in abusive relationships, investigate suspicious deaths, and ensure that murderers like Victoria don't walk free just because they have the right connections. Victoria had collapsed in her chair, the antidote vial still sitting just out of reach on the table. Her choice hung in the air. Confess and live in prison, or stay silent and die free. I'll take the deal, she whispered finally, her voice broken. I'll confess. Give me the antidote, and I'll confess to everything. But Sarah shook her head slowly. It's too late, Mother. You see, there's one more thing Dad's video hasn't revealed yet. Thomas's image smiled that terrible smile one last time. The antidote Sarah offered you? It's real. It would work. But here's the thing, Victoria. You've been taking it for the past 2 weeks. Elena's been putting it in your morning coffee. You're already recovering. The tremors, the hair loss, they'll continue for another month. But you're going to live. You were never going to die. The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd been tortured with the fear of death, manipulated into revealing everything, when she was already being saved. Why? She breathed. Because death would have been too easy, Robert answered. You needed to suffer like Thomas suffered, like Rebecca suffered, like I've suffered for 20 years. But most importantly, you needed to reveal the truth, and you did. Charlotte held up her phone, which had been recording the entire session. Everything you've said today is admissible. Your confession about Rebecca, the insurance fraud, the attempted poisoning of Thomas, all of it. 6 months later, the headlines had faded. The Blackwood scandal had been replaced by newer tragedies, fresher betrayals, but in room 237 of the Riverside Psychiatric Facility, Victoria Blackwood sat by the window, her hair now completely white, growing back in patches like snow on dead grass. Through the bulletproof glass, she could see the construction site across the street. The Rebecca Memorial Hospital was nearly complete, funded entirely by Thomas's fortune, the fortune that should have been hers. Time for your medication, Mrs. Blackwood, the nurse said, entering with a small paper cup of pills. Victoria looked at the nurse, young, pretty, with familiar green eyes and a slight southern accent. For a moment her heart jumped. Jake? The nurse smiled, but it wasn't kind. No, Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Emma. Emma Morrison Blackwood. You probably don't remember, but you met me once at the trial. I'm David's daughter. David doesn't have a daughter, Victoria mumbled, confusion clouding her eyes. Adoptive daughter, Emma clarified, checking Victoria's chart. He and my other father, Charles, adopted me 3 years ago, right around the time he started playing Jake for you. Uncle David tells the most interesting bedtime stories about his acting jobs. She set down the pills and a cup of water. Sarah says hello, by the way. She's doing well in prison. Only 3 years for the poisoning, since you didn't actually die. She and David write to each other every week. It's really quite romantic in a tragic sort of way. Victoria took the pills mechanically, her mind struggling to process. Michael? Tibbet, last I heard. Monastery life suits him, apparently. He sends prayers for your soul. Emma's smile turned colder. Though between you and me, I think your soul's beyond saving. As Emma turned to leave, Victoria called out desperately, Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them all I'm sorry. But the door had already closed, leaving Victoria alone with her ghosts. On the wall, someone had hung a single photograph. Thomas on their wedding day, young and hopeful before the lies began. And in the reflection of the glass, Victoria could swear she saw them all. Thomas, Rebecca, Robert, Elena, even Sarah, watching her with eyes that held no forgiveness, only the cold satisfaction of justice finally served.